motion light in our backyard kept coming on for maybe 2 seconds at a time, then going dark again. And every time it did, I found myself holding still without meaning to, as if I moved too fast. Whoever was out there might realize I was looking. I was in the kitchen with every downstairs light on. Not just the normal ones either. The overhead light above the sink, the stove light, the little lamp on the counter near the fruit bowl, the living room lamp, the entrée light, all of it. I always do that during storms. My wife makes fun of me for it because she says it turns the whole first floor into a fish tank. But I've never liked sitting in a dark house while thunder's hitting so close it rattles the dishes. That night, the rain was coming down hard enough that the backyard looked grainy through the window, almost like static. I could barely see the fence line until lightning lit everything up white for a second. And that's when I saw the side gate standing open again. Not swinging, not loose, open. I'd already gone out once and latched it. I remembered the metal click. I remembered pulling on it to make sure it held, because I was annoyed enough to check twice. So seeing it open again, wide enough to show the dark strip between our yard and the neighbors, did something weird to me. Not panic exactly. More like my brain started moving pieces around trying to make them fit, and none of them did. The part I keep coming back to is this. The light never stayed on long enough for me to see anyone. It was like whoever was out there knew exactly where not to be. My wife had gone out of state that Friday to see her mom and sister, and I was supposed to have one of those quiet weekends people act like they want all the time. Order takeout, watch a couple of stupid action movies she doesn't care about, and fall asleep on the couch with the TV still on. That was the plan. We live on the outskirts of Dayton, one of those neighborhoods where it stops feeling suburban about 2 turns before your street, because the roads get darker and the lots spread out. You're still around other houses, but not in a way that makes you feel close to anybody at night. I don't do great alone in houses. Apartments are fine, hotels are fine, but a house has too many separate sounds. The fridge kicks on in another room. The siding pops when the temperature changes. Water moves through pipes and seems louder than it should. Add heavy rain, and everything gets worse because every normal noise sounds like something trying not to be heard. So around 9 that night, right before the worst of the storm rolled in, I did my usual thing. I checked the front door, then the back. I made sure the side door from the garage was locked. I turned on the downstairs lights. All of them, like that, somehow made the place more solid. Then I brought a blanket into the living room, heated leftover Chinese food, and put on a movie I'd already seen, because I didn't want to pay that much attention to it. At first, it was normal. Just rain on the windows and thunder every few minutes, some closer than others. The kind of storm where the weather alerts keep buzzing on your phone, but nothing's actually happening except noise. I texted my wife a picture of the dog from the movie because it looked like her parents' dog, and she sent back one of those laughing replies and told me not to stay up too late. I remember that because later I kept looking at that last stupid text as it belonged to a different night. The first time I noticed the gate was during a lightning flash. I was carrying my plate into the kitchen, and for 1 second the whole backyard lit up bright and flat, like a photograph. The side gate was open toward the alley strip behind our fence. I stood there for a second, thinking maybe I was seeing it wrong through the rain. Then it got dark again, and I put the plate down and went closer to the window. Couldn't tell. The glass was spotted with water and reflected the kitchen behind me. I grabbed my rain jacket from the hook by the garage door. It was my old green one with the broken zipper pull. The one I still have because it works fine if you pinch the tab with your fingernails. I didn't even put on shoes. I just stepped into the backyard in socks and immediately regretted that because the grass was cold and half the patio was already slick. The gate was open. The latch wasn't broken. It wasn't bent. I shut it, slid the latch into place, then pulled it once, twice, solid. I remember looking over the top of the fence toward the houses behind us, seeing nothing except rain and a few blurred porch lights. I told myself the wind must have caught it somehow. Maybe I hadn't latched it all the way earlier. Maybe I'd been distracted. That felt reasonable enough. When I came back inside, I dried my feet with a dish towel and changed socks, which is exactly the kind of regular dumb thing you do when you're trying to prove to yourself a moment wasn't weird. I restarted the movie. I sat down. I tried not to keep looking toward the kitchen. Maybe 20 minutes later, the motion light came on. It stayed on just long enough that I could see the wet shine of the patio and the edge of the yard. No person, no animal, nothing moving. Then it went off again. I muted the TV. Rain, distant thunder. The refrigerator is humming. Then another flash of lightning, brighter this time, and I saw the gate open again. I actually said, "Oh, come on," out loud, like the weather was being annoying on purpose. And honestly, that helped for about 5 seconds. It made it feel normal. Just a gate, just wind, just bad luck and bad timing. But I didn't go right back out. That was the first change. I stood in the living room and thought about it. If the latch was bad, why had it felt secure in my hand? If the wind was doing it, why wasn't it banging or swinging? Why did I only ever see it already open? Then I started doing that thing scared people do, where they pretend they're being logical when really they're just stalling. I checked the forecast on my phone. I looked up wind gusts. I actually opened a weather app and zoomed in on the moving storm line like that was going to explain a gate. Eventually, I went back out anyway because leaving it open felt worse. This time I put on shoes and took my phone flashlight. The rain had picked up and the beam just bounced off it. Everything looked close and far away at the same time. I reached the gate, latched it again, and this time I crouched down and looked at the hinge side. Nothing obvious. Just wet metal, a little rust, and water running down the fence posts. I remember standing there with rain dripping off the bill of my cap, looking into that narrow, dark space outside the fence, and having the specific feeling that I shouldn't turn my back until I was inside again. There wasn't any reason for that yet, just a feeling. I got back in, locked the door, and instead of sitting on the couch, I started drifting between the kitchen and living room, pretending I was tidying up. I wiped a clean counter. I folded the blanket. I checked the back door lock even though I'd just locked it. The house felt different then, not unsafe exactly, more aware. Like the walls hadn't changed, but my relationship to the windows had. That's the watched part, I guess. I couldn't see anybody. I never saw anybody then. But after that second time with the gate, I stopped standing in open rooms the same way. I'd pass the window fast. I'd angle myself so I could look out without fully being in view. I caught myself doing it and felt stupid, but I kept doing it. Around 10:30, the storm got louder. One of those stretches where the thunder isn't separate booms anymore, it's just a rolling pressure over the house. The motion light came on again, off again, then on, off. I pulled up the backyard camera app on my phone and then remembered right away that we never installed one back there. We'd talked about it after somebody went through unlocked cars on our street last summer, but like a lot of house things, it turned into one of those conversations you keep having without doing anything about. Front door camera, yes. Backyard, no. So there was staring at a blank space on my phone where a camera feed would have been, which felt like its own little joke. I checked the front camera anyway. Empty porch, wet driveway. The street is shining in the rain. No cars creeping by, nothing like that. I almost called my wife just to hear another person's voice, but I didn't because I knew exactly how it would sound. I, alone in an overlit house, am getting worked up over a gate in a storm. So instead, I sent her another text asking if she'd landed okay earlier. She didn't answer right away, probably asleep or talking with family. And that somehow made the house feel even bigger. A little before 11, I closed the kitchen blinds. Not all the way. Just enough that I wasn't staring into my own reflection every time lightning hit. The living room blinds, too. I left gaps because I still wanted to see out. That should tell you where my head was. I didn't want to be seen, but I definitely wanted to keep watching. The motion light kept going on in short bursts, never long enough. I opened the back door once and listened, that's all. Just stood there under the little overhang and listened to the rain. I thought maybe I'd hear a branch scraping the fence, or maybe a loose section knocking somewhere, anything that would connect the light and the gate to something normal. But the rain covered everything. It flattened the sound. The only thing I could really hear was runoff pouring from the gutter on the corner of the house. I locked the door again and told myself I was done checking. Then, close to midnight, I heard something from the basement, not a bang, more like a soft, irregular tapping. I froze halfway between the kitchen and the stairs. At first, I thought it was the storm again, maybe runoff hitting the window well outside. But then I heard it a second time, and then a faint wet sound, and because I apparently wasn't done finding reasons not to call anybody, I went to look. Our basement is unfinished except for one section with shelves and an old rug my wife wants to throw out. But I keep saying we'll use it someday. The stairs down there always smell a little like concrete dust and detergent because we keep the laundry stuff by the wall. That smell hit me first, then something colder than the upstairs air, damp in a way that made the back of my throat feel tight. There was muddy water on the floor beneath the small window near the side of the house. Not a lot, a trail of it, thin and dirty, running over the concrete toward the drain. At first, my brain grabbed onto the easiest answer, which was that the storm had forced water through. Old house, old window, problem solved. I even felt relief for a second, a leak I could understand. Then I got closer. The window wasn't just wet. It was cracked open, maybe an inch. That window should have been locked from the inside. We don't use it, ever. It's one of those narrow basement windows that sits high in the wall, half in a window well outside. You have to reach up awkwardly to unlatch it, and the latch is stiff. I know because I'd wrestled with it the previous fall when I was checking drafts before winter. I put my hand on the sill and felt grit and muddy streaks. My heart started doing that hard thudding thing where it doesn't feel fast at first, just heavy. I looked straight up at the window, and for one ridiculous second, I expected a face to be there looking back down at me. Second wasn't. Just darkness and rainwater threading down the glass from outside. I shut it hard enough that the pane rattled. Then I locked it. Then I checked it twice. There was mud on the inside edge of the frame. Not much, just enough that I couldn't tell myself it had blown in. I backed away from it without meaning to. Actually took 2 steps back like the heat had come off it. This was the point where I should have called the police right away. I know that. I've replayed it enough times. But the reason I didn't is embarrassing and stupid and probably very normal. I still didn't know what I had. An open gate, a motion light, a cracked basement window during a storm. I was scared, but I was also arguing with myself. If I call and it turns out to be weather and an old latch, I'm the guy who panicked over rain. If I don't call and I'm wrong, then what? I compromised in the dumbest possible way. I grabbed the old aluminum baseball bat from the corner by the stairs, the one I haven't swung since college, and I took it upstairs with me. That felt like doing something. It was after midnight then. The storm had settled into that steady, brutal rain where it seems like morning is never going to happen. I walked through the first floor, checking locks again, bat in one hand, phone in the other. Back door locked. Front door locked. Garage entry locked. I even checked the hall closet because once my mind started going, every dark rectangular space in the house felt like something I needed to verify. The whole time I had this pressure between my shoulders, this certainty that if I looked out the wrong window at the wrong moment, somebody would be there. I ended up in the kitchen because from there I could see part of the backyard through the gap in the blinds. I turned off the TV. I couldn't stand the extra sound anymore. Just stood there in the bright kitchen with the bat hanging against my leg and watched the rain. The motion light came on. This time it stayed on. I could see the patio table, the grill cover twitching in the wind, water running off the roof in silver lines. Nothing else. Then lightning hit somewhere close enough that the whole yard flashed white and sharp. A man was standing beneath the covered patio. He was maybe 15 feet from the back door, just inside the line where the roof kept the rain off. I don't know how long he'd been there before the lightning showed him to me. That part makes me sick to think about, because he wasn't moving at all. If the light hadn't changed, I might not have seen him then either. He was just there, solid and upright, one hand hanging at his side, clothes dry from the shoulders down because he was perfectly placed under the cover. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything dramatic. My body locked before my brain did. What I remember most clearly is that his face wasn't detailed to me. I couldn't tell you eye color or age exactly. The light was wrong for that, but I knew he was looking straight into the house. Not at the yard, not at the door lock, at the house itself, as if he was checking whether I saw him back. There was that Taz-if gap between lightning and thunder, only a couple of seconds. And in that space, neither of us moved. I had the bat in my right hand. My phone was in my left hand. My fingers had gone slippery on both. The kitchen sounded too loud, like the hum of the refrigerator had suddenly been turned up. Then the thunder hit. The windows shook. The sound came through my chest more than my ears, and while that was still rolling, he took one slow step backward, not turned away, backward, still facing the house. Then another. Then he was in the dark beyond the edge of the patio roof, and the rain swallowed the outline of him almost instantly. I finally moved then. I backed away from the window so fast I clipped my hip on one of the kitchen chairs and almost dropped the bat. I remember saying nope, no, 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 like that was useful. I hit the button on my phone for an emergency call and then stopped, because the idea of speaking, of making noise downstairs while I was still standing there in the open, suddenly felt impossible. So I did the only thing my body seemed willing to do. I went upstairs, not quietly either, fast. Bat knocking the banister, socks slipping on the wood, every survival instinct in me narrowed down to one idea: get behind a door. I got into our bedroom, locked it, then shoved the dresser chair under the knob, even though I know that doesn't really do much. I turned off the bedroom light and stood there in the dark, breathing through my mouth because my throat felt too tight to pull air through my nose. Then I called the police. My voice sounded flat and strange to me, like somebody trying too hard to be calm. I told the dispatcher I had seen someone under my back patio, that I thought there might been an attempted entry through the basement window, that I was upstairs and the house was locked. She kept asking if I could hear anybody inside. I said I didn't know. I really didn't. The storm was so loud I could barely hear my own floor creak under me. An officer eventually came by, but not right away. Storm calls all over, she said later. Downed lines, alarms, flooded roads. I stayed in that bedroom while the rain hammered the roof, and now and then I thought I heard something from downstairs. Then I couldn't tell if I'd actually heard it or if my mind was taking random house noise and forcing it into footsteps. I held that bat across my knees, sitting on the floor beside the bed for hours. A few times, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the man under the patio. That's the part nobody tells you. Even after you see something undeniable, your brain still keeps reaching for normal, because normal is easier to sit with in the dark. But every time I started to drift that way, I'd picture how dry he was, how still, how he stepped back instead of turning. That wasn't somebody caught by surprise. That was somebody deciding not to come forth. At least not then. By the time the sky started getting further, the rain had eased into a steady drizzle. I heard a car door outside, then another, and finally a voice on a loudspeaker telling me to come to the front window if I could. When I looked out, there were 2 police cars at the curb and 1 officer on the porch in a poncho darkened by rain. They checked the yard, the side strip, and the basement window well. I came downstairs with the Bat Styland L in my hand and felt stupid carrying it, but I didn't put it down until the officer asked me to. The back patio was empty, obviously. The gate was closed then. I hadn't closed it again. At the basement window outside, the soil in the little well had turned to mush. There were marks there, maybe prints, maybe just the storm. The officer crouched and looked at them for a while, then stood up and gave me the kind of answer that's technically honest and completely useless. Could have been someone. Could have been weather. Hard to tell after a night like that. Inside, the muddy water on the basement floor was still there. The streaks on the sill were still there too, though lighter now where I had touched them. One of the officers took pictures. They checked every room, every closet, the garage, all of it. Nobody inside. No broken locks, no missing things. My wife drove back the next morning instead of Sunday as planned. I didn't ask her to at first, but I think she could hear it in my voice when I told her what happened. We replaced the gate latch that week. We put a camera in the backyard, then another one on the side of the house. I had the basement window fixed and the well cover replaced. I even put one of those motion alarms down there for a while, which made me jump every time the cat from next door got too curious near the house. But none of that answered the part that bothers me. The footprints around the basement window, whatever was there, got washed almost clean by morning. The gate gave us nothing. The cameras came too late. So what I ended up with was a man who knew where the covered section of our patio sat, knew how to stay out of the motion light long enough to keep me guessing, and found the one old basement window on the house that could be worked from outside. If he had already found a way partially into the house once, then I don't know how long he'd been testing the property before choosing that specific stormy night. The next one is quieter at first. which honestly made it worse. When my apartment buzzer went off that night, I almost ignored it because I'd already changed into a t-shirt and reading glasses. And in my building, that usually means the day is over. Then the speaker by the kitchen crackled, and a man's voice, low and unhurried, said, "You left your shoes out again. Not your package is here." No, the front desk. Not even maintenance, just that. I stood there with a mug of tea in my hand, listening to the rain hit the windows and the speaker hiss back into silence. And the first thought I had wasn't fear. It was irritating. It sounded like somebody commenting on a habit they had no business noticing. I set the mug down and looked at my apartment door. Then at the shoes on the mat outside, visible through the peephole if you leaned right. I leave them out there after late runs when they're muddy. I always have. Same pair, same spot. Toes pointed toward the hall so they don't drip onto my floor. The part that got under my skin was that when I'd checked earlier, they hadn't been that way. Somebody had already touched them once. I've lived alone in downtown Seattle for years, in one of those older apartment buildings that used to be nicer than it is now, but still insists on acting like it has standards. Brick exterior, old tile in the lobby, mailboxes with little brass label frames, a front desk that calls itself a concierge if management is sending an email, and a night manager if they're being honest. It's not a luxury by any stretch, but it's solid. Secure front doors, fob access, cameras in the main entry and elevator, and staff who know most tenants by sight. Not the kind of place where I spend much time worrying. And I do like being alone, which I think matters here. Some people hear a building settle or an elevator groan and start inventing problems. I don't. I actually like rainy nights in the city because they make everything quieter. The street noise gets flattened. Fewer people linger outside bars. Traffic goes from a constant wash to something farther away. If I'm home with a book and the windows streaked with rain, I'm happy. That evening had been routine. I got back from a late run around the neighborhood a little before 10. The weather was miserable in a way Seattle is very good at, not dramatic, just relentless. Fine rain when I left that turned into steady cold rain by the time I got back. I climbed the stairs because the elevator always smells like wet dog when it's raining, got to my floor, stepped out of my running shoes, and left them on the mat outside my apartment door like I always do. Mud from the trail section by the park had gotten up the sides of them, and I didn't want it all over the hardwood. I went inside, showered, changed into dry clothes, and settled into my usual chair by the front window with a book and a mug of tea. My apartment faces the street, not the internal alley, so on rainy nights I can see reflections off the pavement and little umbrellas moving under the street lamps. It's a nice view when the weather's bad, which is part of why I pay more rent than I should. Around 10, I opened my door to bring in a package I'd forgotten on the mat. And that's when I noticed the shoes had been turned neatly to face inward toward my apartment. Not kicked by accident, not shifted, turned, both of them. I remember actually crouching down and looking at the mat, as if that would tell me how it happened. The shoes were side by side, mud drying on the edges, laces tucked in. Whoever moved them had done it carefully enough that they looked placed, not disturbed. My first thought was that one of my neighbors had nudged them while carrying groceries or something, and then straightened them out without thinking. People do odd, absent-minded stuff in apartment hallways. I turned them back around and forgot about it for maybe half an hour. That was recovery number one, I guess. It helped that the building felt like itself. I could hear the old pipe knock from somewhere below, the muted TV through the wall from the unit across the hall, the elevator cable whining faintly when somebody used it. Familiar noise, familiar place, nothing dramatic. Then, a little after 11, I heard paper slide against my door. Not a knock, just that stiff whisper of an envelope or notice being pushed under. That got my attention right away because building notices in our place are usually taped to the door frame during the day. Maintenance never does rounds overnight unless something has gone very wrong with plumbing. And even then, they knock first because half the tenants are asleep. I walked over, picked up the paper, and saw what looked like a photocopied maintenance notice folded in half. No odd building logo, but plenty of things in old, no odd building logo. That odd isn't automatically alarming. Still, I opened the door and looked out. Hallway empty. The carpet runner was damp near the stairwell end, probably from people coming in out of the rain. My shoes were where I'd left them. The overhead hall light near the elevator was flickering a little, which it had been doing for weeks, because management waits until things fail before replacing anything. Nothing about the hall G, and that was almost more unsettling than if somebody had still been there. In a building, people should leave traces. A closing stairwell door, an elevator ding, footsteps, something. I brought the paper inside but didn't open it all the way at first. The top line said something about access and unit entry, and I remember feeling annoyed more than anything. I called the front desk from the intercom panel in my kitchen. The night manager answered on the third ring. It was Martin, who'd been there forever and had one of those voices that always sounds like he's halfway through chewing. I asked if maintenance was doing anything on the upper floors. He said, "Not tonight." I said I just had a notice pushed under my door. He paused and I could hear a TV somewhere on his end low. Then he said, "No one should be doing notices. We're not running overnight work." That was the first time I felt my stomach go a little hollow. I asked if maybe somebody was doing emergency checks because of the rain, something with leaks or windows. He said no, and I could hear him starting to wake up properly now. He asked which floor I was on again, even though he absolutely knew. I told him. He said he'd check the lobby cameras and see if anyone had been up. That gave me another little bit of relief. Not much, but enough. Martin was competent in that quiet, slightly grumpy way people can be when they've worked the same building too long. If he'd look at the cameras, there'd be an explanation in 5 minutes. Misdeliver the red paper. Contractor from another property. A tenant playing a dumb joke. I set the folded notice on the counter and went back to my chair, but I didn't pick up the book again. I sat there listening to the rain and the faint building sounds and waiting for the phone to ring. Instead, maybe 3 minutes later, the buzzer went off. That's where I started. The speaker crackled, and that voice said, "You left your shoes out again." He didn't sound out of breath. Didn't sound drunk. Didn't sound like someone trying to be funny either. He sounded close, like he was talking low because he already knew I'd hear him. I pressed the talk button and said, "Who is this?" "Nothing." I said it again louder. Still nothing. Just static and then the little click when the line closes. At that point, I did what I probably should have done sooner. I locked the deadbolt, then the chain, even though I rarely use the chain because it's more symbolic than rarely picking up the folded notice, and finally opened it. It wasn't a maintenance notice. It was a photocopy of my lease application from when I'd first moved into the building years earlier. My full name at the top. My old employer is listed in the middle. The emergency contact box near the bottom is circled in red pen. My sister's name and phone number in my own handwriting from back then, copied and enlarged enough that I recognized the shape of it before I consciously read it. I had just enough time to understand what I was holding before I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow ones. Not passing by, approaching, then stopping directly outside my door. That was the first real peek. Not because I saw anything, because the building I knew so well suddenly felt like it had opened one hidden door too many. Somebody inside it had access to old tenant files. Somebody inside it knew my habits. Somebody was standing on the other side of a door I'd trusted for years because of locks I hadn't personally installed and records I hadn't thought about since move-in day. I moved to the peephole without making a sound and looked out. All I got was part of a dark shoulder and the side of a head too close to the door to make out properly. Whoever it was standing slightly off-center, which told me they either knew about peepholes or were just cautious by instinct. I could hear them breathing very faintly under the hum of the hallway lights. Then they moved one of my shoes. I couldn't see the hand do it, but I heard the rubber sole drag on the mat, slow and deliberate. For 1 second, I seriously thought about backing away and waiting for Marty N. or the police, or anybody else to handle it. I had my phone in my hand already. My thumb was over the camera icon because I suddenly wanted a record of anything I could get. Then something very practical cut through the fear. If whoever was outside had a legitimate way into the building, standing there pretending I wasn't home didn't help me. And if they were trying to scare me, they were already succeeding. I know my hallway. I know the distance to the stairwell. I know that if somebody takes off from outside my door, they're likely heading left because the stairwell is closer than the elevator. That familiarity was the only useful thing I had. So I opened the camera on my phone, hit record, unhooked the chain, unlocked the deadbolt, and yanked the door open as hard as I could. I shouted at the same time, not a clever line, just hey, hey, what are you doing? The effect was immediate. Whoever had been outside turned and ran for the stairwell without even looking back. I got a glimpse, that's all. Dark rain jacket, hood down, medium build, maybe male, maybe not. Hard to tell from the angle and speed. They moved like they knew the building layout. No hesitation, no confusion. Straight to the push bar on the stair door. Something metal hit the carpet near my threshold as they pivoted. By the time I reached the hall, phone still recording, and my own voice sounding too loud in the enclosed space, they were already through the stairwell door and gone. I didn't chase. I may be comfortable alone, but I'm not stupid. I backed into my apartment, shut the door, and locked it again, then looked down and saw what they'd dropped. A building master key, not one of the little tenant copies. A longer brass key on a plain, unlabeled ring, the kind management carries clipped to a belt or hidden in a desk drawer. No tag, no color marker, nothing that should have separated it from accountability in the first place. Martin came upstairs 2 minutes later, breathing hard, tie crooked, holding his own ring of keys like a weapon. We watched the video together, which wasn't very helpful because all it really captured was my door swinging open, my own startled shout, and a blurred figure disappearing to the left. But the sound of the stairwell door slamming was clear. So was the key hitting the carpet. Police came after that. Statements, photos, questions about who had access, whether I'd had disputes with anyone, whether the circled emergency contact meant something to me, Sand specifically. It didn't, not beyond the obvious. My sister lived out of state. She'd been my contact because she was my closest relative at the time. That's all, which almost made it worse. There wasn't some personal history I could point to and say, there, that's the reason. It had the feeling of somebody going through a system and selecting a detail. The building manager showed up at the morning in a blazer thrown over a sweater, hair still wet from the rain, looking more offended than scared. They said the dropped key wasn't supposed to be in circulation. They said old application files were kept in a locked management office, with archived copies boxed in storage. They said they'd review access logs and camera footage and change the building lock schedule if needed. A lot of that language stuck with me because it was so administrative. Access logs, circulation, archived copies. It made the whole thing sound less like a person had stood outside my door with my private information, and more like a spreadsheet had developed teeth. For a few days, I almost let their explanations calm me down. Maybe a former employee, maybe sloppy file security. Maybe someone found an old key and used it to move through the building until they got lucky. That's the spiral part of it. Every time I got halfway back to normal, some small detail would pull me out again. Like the fact that the shoes had been turned before the paper appeared, which meant whoever it was had likely been on my floor more than once that night. Or the fact that Martin said no one had buzzed in through the front desk system around the time the intercom call came through, which suggested the person was already inside and using the building's internal panel. Or the fact that when management checked their office, nothing obvious was missing besides photocopies they couldn't account for because, according to them, they had no reason to track old paper duplication in the first place. I stopped leaving my shoes outside after that. I know that's a small detail, but those little routines are what make a place feel like yours. Breaking one means admitting it isn't as private as you thought. I also started noticing things about the building I used to find charming. The way the stairwell doors don't always latch cleanly if you don't let them slam. The blind corner by the laundry room cameras. The old office in the basement, where management kept extra paint cans, holiday decorations, and apparently years of other people's forms. I still live there, though not with the same confidence. Rainy nights are quieter than they used to be. I read with the shoes inside now, door locked, chain on, and sometimes when somebody pushes a flyer under the door in the afternoon, my shoulders still tense before I look down. What I still can't account for is the paperwork, not the scare tactic part. That was obvious enough. It's where it came from. My lease application had my old handwriting on it, my original emergency contact, details I hadn't thought about in years, and had no reason to believe anybody still had in a place a stranger could reach. The key explained how someone could stand outside my apartment door. It never explained how someone inside the building got access to old tenant records that should have been locked in management files for years. The last story is the one I still think about every time a storm starts building after dark. I was standing about 6 feet back from my parents' front door with my phone already open in my hand. And this guy on the porch kept talking to me through the locked storm door like we were having a normal neighbor conversation. He said his car had broken down. He said he just needed to use my phone for a minute. He even gave me this little apologetic smile that probably would have worked on me any other night. But behind him, through the rain, I could still see the dark SUV at the curb with the engine running. And then lightning flashed across the cul-de-sac. C and I saw another person moving along the side of our house, toward the backyard gate. Not hurrying, not sneaking badly, just moving like he already knew where he was going. The man on the porch saw me look past him, and his whole face changed. Not into anything dramatic. He just stopped pretending to be friendly. Like whatever version of the conversation we'd been doing a second earlier was over now. That was the exact second it clicked for me that none of it was random. My parents live outside Baton Rouge in one of those suburban neighborhoods that feels normal in daylight and weirdly isolated once it gets late because all the streets curve and dead end into little pockets of houses. Their place is near the end of a cul-de-sac with a drainage ditch behind the back fences and a line of trees past that. During the summer and early fall, when storms come through hard, the whole neighborhood gets glossy and half-flooded fast. Water pools near the mailbox clusters. The gutters overflow. Everybody starts peeking outside every 15 minutes to see whether their yard is going to become part of the street. I've never liked staying there alone during bad weather. I can do it, but I don't like it. And the stupid thing is, I chose to stay that weekend. My parents were out of town, just a couple of days, and I could gone back to my apartment across town after feeding their dog and checking the place. But I didn't because the forecast kept getting worse. And I have this bad habit of getting obsessive about storms. I watch the radar constantly, refresh alerts, zoom in on the bands, look at neighborhood posts, drainage maps, and all of that. I tell myself I'm being patient, but really, I think I'm trying to get ahead of the part I can't control. So that night, I had my laptop open on the kitchen table with the radar map up, the kind with the red and yellow blobs moving across the parish in real time. Every few minutes, I'd get up, look out the front window, then circle back and check whether the warning polygon had shifted. The power flickered on and off a few times around 11, but never fully died. The house would blink, the Wi-Fi would hesitate, then everything would come back, manageable. Annoying, but manageable. At some point during one of my window checks, I noticed a dark SUV parked near the end of the cul-de-sac with its headlights off. That by itself wasn't enough to mean anything. Storm nights do weird stuff to neighborhoods. People sit in their cars charging phones. Somebody maybe doesn't want to drive in the worst of it. Someone could have been waiting for the floodwater to go down on the main road. I told myself all of the hat. The rain was heavy enough that I couldn't make out a plate, or even the exact make, just the shape and the dim red glow from the dashboard. Still, I kept looking at it, partly because I was already on edge from being alone, and partly because there wasn't much else moving on the street. Most houses had blinds closed or curtains pulled. A few porch lights were on, fuzzy through the rain. One house across from us had a blue TV light flashing in the living room. People were there, technically. That's the thing about neighborhoods. You're surrounded by other lives and still feel as if something happened. You'd have to explain it from scratch before anyone even understood there was a problem. The SUV stayed put for over an hour. I know that because I kept checking the clock between radar refreshes. Not constantly staring at it, but enough that the time built up. 10 minutes, then 20, then 45. No doors opened, no interior light came on, nobody got out. It just sat there in the same spot with the weather hitting it from every remember trying to make myself stop caring. I heated leftovers. I let the dog out into the screened back porch because the yard was too wet. I changed the TV channel twice without actually watching anything. Every normal thing I did had one eye on the front of the house. A little after midnight, the power flickered harder than it had before. The living room lamp actually cut out long enough for me to think we were done, then blinked back on. I went to the front porch to check how much water was collecting near the curb because that corner floods first. And when I looked up, the SUV was closer. Not in the same place, not at the end of the cul-de-sac anymore, CBI maybe 3 houses. That sounds small, but when a vehicle has supposedly been sitting still forever, and then is suddenly a lot nearer without you hearing it approach, it feels personal. The rain had been loud enough to cover the movement. I know that, but knowing why I didn't hear it didn't help. It still happened in pieces, while I was inside doing normal things, and now it was positioned where whoever was in it had a cleaner view of our driveway and front walk. I stood on the porch longer than I should, trying to decide if I was overreacting. My phone was in my pocket. I thought about taking a picture and immediately felt ridiculous. A picture of a car on a public street or during a storm. Great evidence. Then I thought about texting my parents, but what was I going to say? There's a vehicle outside and I don't like it. I went back. They've locked the front door again, even though it was already locked. I checked the side door, then the back. I looked at the radar, like maybe the weather would give me a job to do other than think. The dog had started hovering near me, not upset exactly, just following me more closely than usual. And I remember being weirdly grateful for that, even though he was a 13-year-old beagle with bad knees and absolutely no security value. By then, I was paying attention to the houses around us in a different way. The couple across the street still had their TV on. The house 2 doors down was dark except for one porch lantern. Somewhere farther off, a garage door opened and shut. Little proof that other people existed, but none of it felt usable. Nobody was outside. Nobody was watching the street with me. The cul-de-sac suddenly felt like a stage with an audience behind curtains. Then there was a knock at the front door. Not pounding, just 3 firm knocks. My whole body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders went tight so fast it felt like I'd been grabbed. The dog barked once, then twice. And I remember actually putting a hand out toward him like he was the one who needed calming down. I went to the side window first instead of straight to the door. That was pure fear. I didn't want to silhouette myself in the glass if somebody was already looking. From the edge of the curtain, I could see a man standing on the porch, hood down, hair wet, one hand up like he was about to knock again. Behind him in the street, through the rain, I could see the SUV idling. The headlights were still off, but I could see the faint exhaust shape in the porch light and the reflection of running lights on wet pavement. His car had not broken down. I don't know if I understood that consciously before I opened the inner door. I think some part of me just knew the picture didn't line up. If your car dies in a storm, you don't leave it running with someone else inside, or nobody inside. You don't stroll to a random house looking calm. I kept the storm door locked and cracked the main door behind it. He looked to be in his 30s, hard to tell in the rain, wearing a dark sweater under a lighter rain shell. Clean-shaven, no obvious panic, no urgency in his voice. "Sorry," he said, "my phone died and my car's acting up. Can I use yours real quick?" People always talk about intuition after the fact, like it's this sharp, clear thing. It wasn't. It was messy. Part of me wanted to help because that's the script you're raised with. If somebody asks for a phone in bad weather, you help. Part of it. If somebody is ready, backing away internally because nothing matched. The running engine. The parked SUV had crept closer over an hour. The way he didn't want to look at the vehicle while saying it was broken down. I said, "I can call somebody for you." He smiled again, shorter this time. "Nah, if I could just use yours, man. It'll be shorter by seconds." Through the mesh of the storm door, the porch light made the rain between us look almost solid. I had my phone in my hand already, and I think he noticed that because his eyes dropped to it and then came back to my face. I said, "Who are you trying to call?" That question made him hesitate, just for a second, long enough to feel it. Then the lightning flashed, and I saw movement to my right, along the side yard. Another figure, dark against darker rain, moving toward the backyard gate. It took me half a second to place what I was seeing because it was so quiet. No shouted signal. No footstep I could hear over the weather. Just a shape sliding along the fence line where nobody should been. When I looked back at the man on the porch, he had stopped smiling. Not angry. Not embarrassed to be caught. Just done acting. My mouth went dry so fast it almost hurt. I backed up one step and said, louder than I meant to, "No." He took a small step toward the storm door. Not enough to hit it. Just enough. That was the peak, really. Not a chase, not him forcing the door. Just that tiny shift where both of us understood what the other understood. He knew I'd seen the second person. I knew the phone story was fake. The house behind me suddenly felt too large and too easy to enter if they'd chosen a different point. I brought my phone up and hit emergency call with my thumb while still looking at him. He said, "You don't need to do that." His voice had flattened out completely. I said as loud as I could, "I'm calling 911. I made sure to say it loud enough for the side yard too. That part was instinct. If there were two of them, I wanted both to know the conversation had changed. The operator answered almost immediately, and I started talking fast, address first. Then there's a man at my front door and another person on the side of the house, and I think they're trying to get in." The man on the porch held my eyes for maybe 1 second more. Then, from across the street, floodlights snapped on, bright ones. The kind mounted under an eave that washes an entire driveway and half the road in white light. The washing was so exact it felt staged, like somebody in the other house had finally looked up at the right second. The man's face changed again, not scared exactly, but calculating in a way I still hate thinking about. He glanced toward the light, then toward the side yard. A second later, the other figure came running back into view. No attempt to hide day anymore. Just sprinting through the rain from the side of our house toward the curb. The guy on the porch bolted after him without another word. Both of them got into the SUV, driver and passenger side, so fast it told me they'd done that kind of movement before, and the vehicle tore out of the cul-de-sac hard enough to throw water from the curb. I stayed on the line with 911, still backing away from the door even after they were gone, because my legs had gone shaky and I didn't trust the sightline from the porch. The neighbor across the street opened their front door, but didn't come all the way out. I can't blame them. It was still storming, and from their angle, they probably had no idea what they'd interrupted. Deputies got there within minutes, lights bouncing off every wet surface on the street. By then, the whole neighborhood had partially woken up in that way people do when something almost happens near them. Front doors cracked open. A couple of garage lights are on, faces behind windows. Everybody was present after the useful part was over. I gave the best description I could, which wasn't much. Dark SUV, maybe black, maybe dark blue, 2 men, one at the door, one along the side yard, no plate, rain too heavy. The deputy walked the fence line with a flashlight and found the backyard gate unlatched. Not open yet, just unlatched. That detail made my stomach drop more than seeing them run. One more minute of me hesitating at the front door. One more minute of thinking I didn't want to be rude or dramatic, and the whole shape of that night might have changed. The neighbor with the floodlights came over once things had settled down enough for people to step outside. Middle-aged guy, bare feet in sandals, rain jacket over pajama pants. He said he happened to look out because his power had flickered again, and he saw a man on our porch. When he turned on the lights, he thought maybe it was just someone needing help, until both men took off running. Even then, he said, he didn't really understand what he was seeing until the SUV peeled away. That's what exposed feels like, I think. People nearby, lights available, help theoretically close. But everything depends on somebody noticing the right thing at the right second and deciding it looks wrong. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the kitchen with the radar still open on my laptop, rain bands sliding across the map like nothing had happened, and replayed every choice I made. The first time I saw the SUV was at the end of the cul-de-sac. The second time it moved closer. The moment I almost opened the main R wider because I didn't want to seem rude through the storm door. The extra second I spent asking who he needed to call instead of just ending it. My parents came home early the next day. My dad added better cameras. My mom started keeping the side gate locked from the inside with an extra latch. For a while, they asked neighbors if anybody had home footage of the street. But the rain had blurred most of it into headlights and smears. One camera caught a dark vehicle entering the neighborhood earlier that night, but nothing clear enough to use. No one ever figured out who the men were. And what bothers me isn't just that they came to the house. It's how patient the setup was for something that felt so sudden once it reached the door. The parked SUV had its lights off. The slow move closer through the storm. Dot had its keeping me busy at the front while the other went to the side gate. That isn't random panic. That's a plan shaped around weather and visibility. And the fact that on bad nights, people mostly stay inside and mind their own business. I still watch weather radar too much. I still zoom in on the little moving bands and refresh the map more than I need to. But now, when the colors turn yellow and red over that neighborhood, I don't think first about the ditch behind my parents' fence or whether the street is going to flood. I think about that SUV sitting dark at the end of the cul-de-sac like the rain was part of the plan.